Katherine Grace stumbled off the stagecoach in Sierra Vista, Arizona Territory, on a scorching afternoon in August of 1882. Her left eye swollen nearly shut and painted the colors of a violent sunset. The bruise was fresh enough that the stage driver had given her worried glances the entire journey from Tucson, but she had kept her chin up and her explanations to herself, clutching the carpetbag that held everything she owned in this world. She was 22 years old and had traveled halfway across the country to marry a man she had never met, and now she stood in the dust of this frontier town wondering if she had made the worst mistake of her life. The heat shimmered off the dirt street as she shaded her good eye and looked around. Sierra Vista was smaller than she had expected, just a collection of wooden buildings baking under the relentless sun, but it had the essentials: a general store, a saloon, a church, and what looked like a decent-sized ranch operation on the outskirts. She was supposed to meet her intended at the hotel, a man named Walter Perkins, who had written her 3 stiff, formal letters describing his mercantile business and his need for a respectable wife. He had never once mentioned love or affection, but Katherine had not been in a position to be particular. After her father died and left her penniless in Philadelphia, with her stepmother's boyfriend getting increasingly aggressive in his attentions, becoming a mail-order bride had seemed like her only escape. She had made it as far as the hotel steps when she saw a tall figure coming toward her. The man wore dusty work clothes and a sweat-stained hat, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in this harsh landscape. As he got closer, she could see he was younger than she expected, maybe 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He stopped a few feet away and removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. "Miss Grace." His voice was deep and careful, and something in his tone made her throat tight. "Yes, I am Katherine Grace." She tried to keep her head turned so he would not notice the bruise right away, but it was a futile effort in the bright afternoon light. She watched his expression change as he took in her injured face. His jaw tightened and those amber eyes went hard as stone, but when he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "I am Caleb Brennan. I work the ranch just outside town. Walter Perkins asked me to meet you because he got held up with a shipment in Tucson." "Oh." Katherine felt a wash of relief that she would not have to face her intended immediately, followed by shame that she was relieved. "That is kind of you." Caleb was still looking at her eye, and she saw his hands clench briefly at his sides. "Who did that to you?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. Back east, people had learned to look away from such things, to pretend they did not see. "It is nothing, an accident, Miss Grace." He said her name like he was gentling a spooked horse. "I have been around animals and people my whole life, and I know the difference between an accident and a fist. Who hit you?" She felt tears prick her good eye and blinked them back furiously. She had promised herself she would not cry anymore, that she was starting fresh out here in the territory. "The man who drove the wagon from the train station to Tucson. He thought that because I was traveling alone and going to be a mail-order bride, I was a certain type of woman. When I made it clear I was not, he became angry." The muscle in Caleb's jaw jumped, and his eyes blazed with something that might have frightened her if it had been directed at her. Instead, she felt oddly protected, like this stranger was placing himself between her and every hard thing in the world. "That ends today," Caleb said, and there was steel in his voice, a quiet certainty that sent a shiver down her spine despite the heat. "No one lays a hand on you again, Miss Grace. Not here, not anywhere. You have my word on that." Katherine stared at him, this cowboy who spoke with such conviction about protecting a woman he had just met, a woman who was promised to another man. "Mr. Brennan, I appreciate the sentiment, but you cannot make such promises. You barely know me." "I know enough." He settled his hat back on his head and reached for her carpet bag. "I know you are brave enough to travel across the country alone. I know you defended yourself even though it cost you. And I know that any man who would strike a woman is not fit to be called a man at all. Come on, let me get you settled at the hotel. Mrs. Patterson, who runs it, is a good woman. She will take care of you." As they walked the short distance to the hotel, Katherine found herself sneaking glances at this unexpected cowboy. He moved with a kind of grace despite his size, and he kept himself between her and the street, she noticed, as if shielding her from the curious stares of townspeople. When a drunk stumbled out of the saloon and nearly collided with them, Caleb simply steered her around him with a hand that barely touched her elbow, polite and careful. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a round woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She took one look at Catherine's face and immediately began fussing, sending Caleb to the kitchen for ice while she settled Katherine in a chair in the small lobby. "That poor girl," Mrs. Patterson muttered, pressing a cool cloth to Catherine's forehead. "Traveling all this way, and look what happens. Men can be such beasts." Caleb returned with a chunk of ice wrapped in a clean towel, and Mrs. Patterson took it with a nod of approval. "You are a good man, Caleb Brennan. Your mother raised you right." "Yes, madam." There was grief in those two words, and Katherine found herself wanting to know the story behind it. Mrs. Patterson must have caught the question in Katherine's expression, because she said softly, "Caleb's mother passed 3 years ago, pneumonia. His father followed 6 months later. Some said it was a fever, but we all knew it was a broken heart. They had been married 30 years and were devoted as any two people could be." "I am sorry for your loss," Katherine said, looking at Caleb. "Thank you, Miss Grace." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "If you are settled, I should get back to the ranch. Walter should be back tomorrow, and I imagine you will want time to rest before meeting him properly." The thought of meeting Walter Perkins filled Katherine with a dread she could not quite name. She pushed it aside and nodded. "Yes, thank you for your kindness, Mr. Brennan. Caleb, please, we do not stand much on formality out here." He tipped his hat to both women and headed for the door, then paused and turned back. "Miss Grace, I meant what I said. If you need anything at all, my ranch is 2 miles south of town. The Brennan place. Anyone can point you the right way." After he left, Mrs. Patterson helped Katherine up to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. The older woman chattered about the town as she worked, bringing fresh water for washing and airing out the room. "Caleb Brennan is one of the finest young men in Sierra Vista," she said as she fluffed the pillows. "Works harder than any 3 men put together, trying to keep that ranch going on his own. His father left some debts when he passed, and Caleb has been working them off bit by bit. He could have sold the place and started fresh, but that land has been in his family since before the war, and he is determined to hold on to it." Katherine found herself wanting to know more about the serious cowboy with the gentle hands and the fierce protective streak, but she reminded herself sternly that she was here to marry Walter Perkins. It would not do to develop an interest in another man, no matter how kind he seemed. She spent the rest of the day in her room, alternating the ice on her eye and trying not to think about what tomorrow would bring. Mrs. Patterson brought her supper on a tray, beef stew and fresh bread that was better than anything Katherine had eaten in weeks of travel. As the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, she stood at the window and looked out at this strange new land she would call home. The next morning arrived too quickly. Katherine woke early and dressed with care in her best dress, a modest gray cotton that was appropriate for meeting one's intended husband. The swelling around her eye had gone down some, but the bruise was now a spectacular purple and yellow that no amount of careful positioning could hide. She pinned her auburn hair up neatly and looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Her green eyes looked too large in her pale face, and she could see the anxiety written in every line of her expression. At precisely 10 o'clock, there was a knock on her door. Mrs. Patterson poked her head in. "Mr. Perkins is here, dear. He is waiting in the parlor downstairs." Katherine took a deep breath and smoothed her skirts. "Thank you. I will be right down." The walk down the narrow stairs felt like a march to the gallows. She could hear male voices in the parlor, and as she rounded the corner, she saw two men standing by the window. One was middle-aged and portly, with thinning hair and a prosperous look about him. The other was Caleb, still in his work clothes, his hat in his hands. The older man turned as she entered, and she watched his face change as he took in her bruised eye. His expression went from anticipation to something like disgust, and her heart sank. "Miss Grace," he said stiffly. "I am Walter Perkins, Mr. Perkins. I am pleased to finally meet you." She tried to inject warmth into her voice, but it came out thin and uncertain. Walter glanced at Caleb, then back at her. "What happened to your face?" Before she could answer, Caleb spoke up. "The wagon driver from the train station to Tucson assaulted her when she refused his advances." "I was just telling Mr. Perkins about it." Walter's lips thinned. "I see. That is most unfortunate." He did not sound sympathetic so much as inconvenienced, as if she had brought an unwanted complication to his orderly life. "I trust you did nothing to encourage such behavior." The question hit her like a slap. Katherine felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. "I assure you, Mr. Perkins, I did nothing of the sort. The man was drunk and presumptuous. Still, a lady traveling alone does invite certain assumptions." Walter pulled out his pocket watch and checked the time, as if this conversation was keeping him from more important matters. "I must say, Miss Grace, I had hoped our first meeting would be under better circumstances. I run a respectable business in this town, and appearances matter a great deal. I cannot have my intended wife looking like she has been in a saloon brawl." Katherine felt something inside her go very still and cold. This was the man she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry, and he was more concerned about appearances than her welfare. She opened her mouth to respond, but Caleb beat her to it. "With respect, Mr. Perkins, Miss Grace is the victim here. She was assaulted by a man who should be horsewhipped, and instead of receiving sympathy, you are criticizing her for it." There was an edge to Caleb's voice that made Walter take a step back. "Now see here, Brennan, this is between Miss Grace and myself. You were asked to meet her at the stage, and you have done so. Your services are no longer required." Caleb looked at Katherine, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was concern and anger on her behalf, but also a question, as if he was asking her permission to fight this battle for her. She found her voice. "Mr. Perkins, I have come a very long way to meet you, and I am willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps we could sit down and talk properly, get to know each other a bit before making any hasty decisions." Walter's expression softened slightly. "Yes, that would be appropriate. Brennan, if you would give us some privacy." Caleb did not move for a long moment, his eyes still on Katherine. Then he nodded slowly. "Of course, Miss Grace, remember what I said, if you need anything." "Thank you, Caleb." She used his given name deliberately, and saw Walter's eyebrows rise in disapproval. After Caleb left, Walter settled himself in one of the parlor chairs and gestured for Katherine to sit across from him. For the next hour, he outlined his expectations for a wife. She would run his household, entertain business associates when required, and maintain a respectable presence in the community. He spoke of children as a duty and marriage as a contract. Not once did he ask about her hopes or dreams, her interests or fears. He treated the whole conversation like a business negotiation, which Katherine supposed it was. When he finally wound down, he leaned back and regarded her critically. "I will be honest, Miss Grace. You are not quite what I expected. I had hoped for someone a bit more refined, perhaps, and certainly not damaged goods." The phrase damaged goods landed like a punch. Katherine felt her temper, which she had been carefully controlling, start to slip. "Mr. Perkins, I have a bruised eye, not a scarlet letter. I am the same woman who wrote you those letters, the same woman you agreed to marry sight unseen." "Yes, well, that was before I saw you." He stood up and smoothed his waistcoat. "I need a few days to think this over. I suggest you remain at the hotel, and I will send word when I have made my decision." He left without another word, and Katherine sat in the empty parlor feeling humiliated and furious. She had sold everything she owned to pay for the journey west. She had no money to return to Philadelphia, even if she wanted to, which she did not. Her stepmother had made it clear there was no home for her there. And now this pompous merchant was making her wait on his decision, as if she was a horse he was considering purchasing. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway with a cup of tea. "I heard some of that. I am sorry, dear. Walter Perkins is a successful businessman, but he has always been more concerned with appearances than substance. His first wife died in childbirth 10 years ago, and he has been looking for a replacement ever since. But he wants someone who will look good on his arm at church socials, not a partner." Katherine took the tea with shaking hands. "What am I going to do? I cannot afford to go back east, and I cannot stay here on charity." "Well now, let us not panic just yet. Sierra Vista might be small, but it is not without opportunities. Mrs. Chen, who runs the restaurant, has been looking for help, and the school teacher could use an assistant. You have options, dear." The thought of making her own way was both terrifying and exhilarating. Katherine had never worked outside her father's house, had been raised to be an ornament and a helpmate, not an independent woman. But the alternative was marrying Walter Perkins or someone like him, and that prospect was looking less appealing by the minute. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I think I need some air. Is there a safe place to walk around town?" "Of course, dear. Just stay on the main street and you will be fine. It is Sunday, so most folks are at church or resting. Nice and quiet." Katherine retrieved her bonnet and stepped out into the late morning sunshine. The heat was already building, but there was a dry breeze that made it bearable. She walked slowly down the wooden sidewalk, looking in shop windows and trying to imagine making a life here on her own. She was so lost in thought that she did not notice the horse and rider until a familiar voice called her name. She looked up to find Caleb astride a handsome bay gelding, concern written across his weathered features. "Miss Grace, is everything all right? I saw Perkins leave and he did not look happy." Katherine felt her composure crack just slightly. "He is taking time to decide if he still wants to marry me. Apparently, my bruised eye has made me damaged goods." Caleb's expression darkened. He swung down from his horse with easy grace and ground-tied the animal, then walked over to stand in front of her. "Katherine." The use of her given name felt intimate and right. "You are not damaged. You are brave and strong, and any man who cannot see that is a fool." "You do not know me," she said, but there was no heat in it. "You have known me less than a day. I know that you traveled across the country alone rather than stay in a bad situation. I know you fought back when that driver attacked you, even though it would have been easier to submit. I know you stood up to Perkins this morning instead of just accepting his judgment. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." She looked up at him, this cowboy who seemed to see her more clearly than anyone ever had. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke his voice was rough. "My mother used to say that we show who we are by how we treat people who cannot offer us anything in return. You do not owe me anything, Catherine, and I am not being kind in hopes of a reward. I am being kind because it is the right thing to do, and because I cannot stand to see you hurting." Something shifted in Catherine's chest, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. This man, this virtual stranger, was offering her something Walter Perkins never had in all his careful letters: genuine care for her well-being. "Caleb, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." He glanced up at the sun, gauging the time. "Have you eaten? Mrs. Chen makes the best dumplings this side of the Pacific." Catherine realized she was hungry. She had been too nervous to eat much breakfast, and the confrontation with Walter had left her drained. "That sounds wonderful." They walked together down the street to a small building with a hand-painted sign reading Chen's Restaurant. Inside, it was blessedly cool, and the smells coming from the kitchen made Catherine's mouth water. A tiny Chinese woman emerged from the back, her face lighting up when she saw Caleb. "Caleb Brennan, you are too skinny. I keep telling you, you need to eat more." She spoke with a thick accent, but her English was clear and her smile was warm. "Mrs. Chen, I would like you to meet Miss Katherine Grace. She is new to town, and I told her you make the best food in the territory." Mrs. Chen beamed and turned her attention to Catherine. Then she saw the bruise and her expression shifted to concern. "Oh, poor girl. You sit. I bring you good food and some of my special tea for healing." They settled at a small table by the window, and Mrs. Chen bustled off to the kitchen. Catherine found herself relaxing for the first time since she had arrived in Sierra Vista. There was something about Caleb's presence that made her feel safe, protected in a way she had not felt since her father died. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to know more about this man who had so quickly become important to her. Caleb leaned back in his chair, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "It is not much to tell. We run cattle mostly, some horses. My grandfather started the ranch back in the 50s, and my father built it up into something respectable. When he died, he left some debts behind. Bad investments, mostly. He trusted the wrong people. I have been working to pay them off, but it is slow going. That must be difficult, managing everything alone. I have helped during roundup and branding season, but mostly it is just me and a few hired hands. I had to let most of the crew go when the money got tight." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Catherine could hear the weight of responsibility in his voice. "Your parents must have been remarkable people to raise a son like you." Caleb's expression softened. "They were. They loved each other completely, the way people should but often do not. My father used to say that marrying my mother was the smartest thing he ever did, and she would laugh and say it was the luckiest. They worked together, supported each other. That is what marriage should be, not what Perkins described to you this morning." Catherine felt her throat tighten. "How did you know what he said?" "I could hear his tone through the door before I left. That cold, calculating way he talks, like everything is a business transaction. My parents were not perfect, but they understood that love is about partnership, not ownership." Mrs. Chen returned with steaming plates of dumplings, noodles, and vegetables cooked in a savory sauce Catherine could not identify but tasted incredible. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Catherine found herself studying Caleb when she thought he was not looking. He had strong hands, scarred from work, and there was a weariness around his eyes that spoke of long days and heavy burdens. But when he smiled, which he did when Mrs. Chen came back to refill their tea, his whole face transformed. "What about you?" Caleb asked, setting down his fork. "What was your life like before you came here?" Katherine traced the rim of her teacup with one finger. Quiet, sheltered. My father was a clerk for a shipping company in Philadelphia, and we lived comfortably, if not extravagantly. My mother died when I was 12, and my father remarried a few years later. His new wife had a son from her first marriage who lived with us. Everything was fine until my father had a heart attack last winter. He died very suddenly. I am sorry. Thank you. After he was gone, I discovered we were not as financially secure as I thought. The house was rented and there were debts. My stepmother made it clear I was a burden, and her son started making advances. I knew I needed to leave, but I had no money and no prospects. That is when I saw the advertisement for mail-order brides. Caleb's jaw tightened. "This son, did he hurt you?" he tried. I fought him off, but it was only going to get worse. That is why I left so quickly, why I agreed to marry a complete stranger. It seemed preferable to staying there. And now you are here and the stranger is not what you hoped. Katherine gave a rueful laugh. No, he is not. But neither is Sierra Vista entirely what I expected. I thought it would be all desert and danger, but Mrs. Patterson is kind. Mrs. Chen makes wonderful food, and you have been more welcoming than I had any right to expect. Caleb met her eyes across the table, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart skip. Katherine, I know this is forward, and I know you are promised to another man, but I have to say this. You do not have to marry Perkins. You do not have to marry anyone you do not want to marry. There are other options, like working in a restaurant or assisting at the school. Caleb, I appreciate the thought, but those positions pay barely enough to survive, and I would be dependent on Mrs. Patterson's charity for housing until I saved enough to afford my own place, which could take months. Or you could marry someone else. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Katherine's heart began to race. What are you saying? Caleb took a deep breath, and she could see him gathering his courage. I am saying that I know we just met, and this is crazy, but I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I saw you step off that stage. You are brave and beautiful and strong, and you deserve better than Walter Perkins treating you like a piece of merchandise. Marry me instead. Katherine stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. Caleb, you do not mean that. You are just being kind. I am not kind. There was frustration in his voice now. I am selfish. I saw you and I wanted you to stay, wanted you to be part of my life, and I am trying to make that happen. But I am also serious. I can offer you a home and protection and respect. I can promise to work hard and treat you well and never raise a hand to you. I cannot offer you much money, not right now, but the ranch is good land and it will provide for us if we work together. This is insane. People do not propose marriage after knowing each other for one day. People out here do what they have to do. The rules are different in the territory, Katherine. Life is hard and short, and when you find something good, you hold on to it. He reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. I am not asking you to love me right now. I am asking you to give me a chance to earn that love. Marry me, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Katherine looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. This was madness. She had come here to marry Walter Perkins, and now she was considering a proposal from a cowboy she had known for barely 24 hours. But when she tried to imagine her life with Walter, all she felt was dread. When she thought about Caleb, about the way he looked at her like she mattered, the way he had defended her without hesitation, she felt something else entirely. Hope. I do not know what to say. Say yes. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a gentle gesture that made her shiver. Say you will take a chance on me, on us. I know I am asking a lot, but I am offering everything I have in return. She looked up and met his eyes, those amber depths so full of sincerity and want. "What about Walter? I am promised to him." "He does not want you, not really. He wants a decoration for his life, someone who fits his narrow idea of what a wife should be. You deserve more than that, Catherine. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are and loves you for it. And you think you could love me. You do not even know me. I know enough. And I have a whole lifetime to learn the rest." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the tears of humiliation and fear she had shed over the past few days. These were tears of possibility, of a future she had not dared to imagine. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know. We could be making a terrible mistake, we could, or we could be making the best decision of our lives." She took a shaky breath. "If I say yes, what happens next?" Caleb's face broke into a smile that transformed him from handsome to devastating. "We go see Reverend Matthews and tell him we want to get married as soon as possible. We send word to Perkins that you have changed your mind, and then you come home with me to the ranch and we start building a life together. Just like that, just like that." Catherine thought about her options. She could wait for Walter's decision, marry him if he still wanted her, and spend the rest of her life being judged and found wanting. She could try to make it on her own, scraping by on whatever work she could find, alone in a strange town. Or she could take this leap of faith with a man who had shown her more kindness in one day than her intended had in 3 months of correspondence. "Yes," Caleb blinked. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Caleb Brennan. I must be out of my mind, but yes." He stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. And before Catherine knew what was happening, he had pulled her to her feet and into his arms. The embrace was brief and respectful, but she could feel the strength in him, the joy, and it made her feel safe and treasured in a way she had never experienced before. Mrs. Chen poked her head out of the kitchen, took in the scene, and clapped her hands together with delight. "Wedding. You are getting married. Oh, this is wonderful. I will make special feast, the best food you ever tasted," Caleb laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. That would be wonderful." They paid for their meal, though Mrs. Chen tried to refuse the money, insisting it was a wedding gift. Then they stepped out into the afternoon sun, and Catherine felt like she was walking in a dream. She was engaged, again, but this time to a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. "Should we go see the Reverend now?" she asked, "if you are ready. Or we could wait, give you time to think it over." "No," Catherine surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "No, I do not want to wait. I do not want to give myself time to talk myself out of this. Let us go now." The church was a simple white building at the end of the main street, with a small house beside it where the Reverend lived. Reverend Matthews turned out to be a lean man in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He listened to their request with raised eyebrows but no judgment. "You are both adults and of sound mind," he said carefully. "But Miss Grace, you only arrived yesterday, is that right? And you were promised to Walter Perkins." "I was, but circumstances have changed. I have realized that Mr. Perkins and I would not suit. Caleb and I are better matched." The Reverend looked at Caleb. "Son, are you certain about this? Marriage is a serious commitment, not something to be entered into lightly." "I am certain, Reverend. I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Reverend Matthews studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I will need to post the banns, which means the earliest you could marry would be 3 weeks from now." Catherine felt her heart sink. 3 weeks was a long time, time for doubts to creep in, time for Walter to interfere or for Caleb to change his mind. Caleb must have seen her expression because he said, "Reverend, is there any way to waive the waiting period? I know it is irregular, but Miss Grace is in a difficult position, and I want to make sure she is protected." The Reverend stroked his chin. Well, the waiting period is customary but not legally required in the territory. If you are both absolutely certain and if you can find 2 witnesses, I could perform the ceremony today. Today? Katherine felt dizzy. Caleb looked at her. Only if you want to. We can wait if you need time. But Katherine thought about spending 3 weeks at the hotel, waiting for Walter's decision, being the subject of town gossip. She thought about the way Caleb had defended her, the way he had offered her a choice when she had none. She thought about the warmth in his eyes and the strength in his hands and the possibility of a future built on respect and partnership. Today, she said firmly, I want to marry you today. Finding witnesses proved easier than expected. Mrs. Patterson, when they returned to the hotel to explain the situation, was delighted and immediately volunteered. She also suggested her husband, who ran the livery stable, as the second witness. Within an hour, they were all assembled back at the church. Katherine stood in her simple gray dress, her hair still pinned up neatly, her bruised eye a reminder of how far she had come in such a short time. Caleb stood beside her in clean work clothes, his hair slicked back with water, his hat in his hands. They had no rings, no flowers, no family to witness this moment. But as Reverend Matthews began the ceremony, Katherine felt a peace settle over her. Dearest friends, we are gathered here today to join Caleb and Katherine in holy matrimony. The Reverend's voice was warm and strong. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but with reverence and joy. It is a partnership of equals, a joining of 2 lives into one shared journey. Katherine listened to the familiar words and felt their weight. This was real. In a few minutes, she would be married to a man she had known for barely more than a day. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt calm, centered, right. Caleb, do you take Katherine to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Caleb's voice was steady and sure. I do. Katherine, you take Caleb to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part. She met Caleb's eyes and saw her future there. I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride. Caleb stepped closer, his hands coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. He was careful of her bruised eye, tilting her head just so, and then his lips met hers in a kiss that was sweet and chaste and full of promise. Katherine felt warmth spread through her entire body, and when they parted, she was smiling. Mrs. Patterson was crying happy tears, and her husband was grinning broadly. Reverend Matthews shook both their hands and wished them well. And just like that, Katherine Grace became Katherine Brennan, wife to a cowboy she barely knew but was beginning to trust with her whole heart. They walked out of the church into the late afternoon sun, and Caleb helped her up onto his horse. He swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to take the reins, and Katherine leaned back against his solid chest as they rode out of town toward his ranch. The land stretched out around them, vast and golden in the fading light. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the orange sky. Katherine had never seen anything like it, this wild, beautiful country that was now her home. "Are you all right?" Caleb's voice was soft near her ear. "I am married to a stranger and heading to a ranch I have never seen. I should be terrified. But you are not. No, somehow I am not." She turned her head to look at him. "Is that strange? No stranger than me proposing to you after knowing you for a day." He smiled, and she felt something in her chest flutter. "We are going to be fine, Katherine. I promise you." The ranch appeared as they crested a small rise. It was smaller than Katherine had imagined, just a simple house and a barn and some corrals, but it was neat and well maintained. Caleb had clearly put work into keeping the place up despite his financial struggles. He helped her down from the horse and led her to the house. The door was not locked. Out here, he explained, people did not worry much about theft. The interior was sparse but clean. A main room with a fireplace and a small kitchen area, a bedroom off to one side and a loft above for storage. "It is not much," Caleb said, suddenly looking uncertain. "I know it is not what you are used to." Katherine looked around at the simple furniture, the clean swept floors, the curtains on the windows that showed a woman's touch from long ago. "It is perfect. Did your mother make these curtains?" "Yes. I should probably have taken them down, but I could not bring myself to do it. They are one of the last things she made before she got sick. They are beautiful. I would not change a thing." Caleb set her carpetbag down near the bedroom door. "You can have the bedroom. I will sleep out here for now until you are comfortable with me." Katherine turned to face him. "Caleb, we are married. I will not make you sleep on the floor in your own home." "Katherine, I know this all happened fast. I do not want you to feel pressured into anything. We can take our time, get to know each other." She stepped closer to him, feeling brave in a way she never had before. "I am grateful for your consideration, but I meant what I said in that church. You are my husband now. I want to start our marriage properly." Something heated in Caleb's eyes, but his voice remained gentle. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." He closed the distance between them and kissed her again, deeper this time, and Katherine felt herself respond in ways that shocked and thrilled her. His hands were careful on her waist, respectful even in passion, and when he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, she went willingly, ready to start this new chapter of her life with this good, kind man who had given her a choice when she had none. The next morning, Katherine woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom window and the smell of coffee brewing. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, then remembered. She was married. She was at the ranch. She was Katherine Brennan now, starting a new life in Arizona territory. She dressed quickly and went out to the main room. Caleb was at the stove, frying eggs and bacon, and he looked up when she entered. His smile was warm and just a little shy. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." The words felt strange on her tongue, but also right. "You should have woken me. I can cook. You had a long few days. I figured you could use the rest." He plated the food and brought it to the small table. "Besides, I wanted to make you breakfast on our first morning as a married couple." They ate together, talking about the ranch and what needed to be done. Caleb explained that he had cattle scattered across the range and that he would need to ride out to check on them soon. He had a hired hand named Miguel who came 3 days a week to help with the heavy work, but mostly it was just him managing everything. "What can I do to help?" Katherine asked. Caleb looked surprised. "You do not have to work the ranch, Katherine. Keeping the house is enough." "The house is small and you keep it clean already. I did not come all this way to sit idle, Caleb. Put me to work." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Can you ride?" "A little. My father taught me when I was young, but I am not very experienced." "I will teach you properly." A rancher's wife needs to know how to handle a horse, and if you are serious about helping, there is plenty to do. We need to check the fences, move some cattle to better grazing, and the garden is overgrown because I have not had time to tend it. I can manage a garden. My mother taught me before she died. They spent the morning working side by side. Caleb showed her around the property, pointing out the boundaries and explaining his plans for expanding the herd once he paid off his father's debts. Katherine listened and asked questions, and she could see him warming to her interest, his voice growing more animated as he talked about his dreams for the ranch. In the afternoon, A rider approached. Katherine felt a flutter of anxiety, but Caleb's expression remained calm. "That is Miguel. He is a good man, been working for my family for years." Miguel turned out to be a weathered man in his 40s with a friendly smile and a thick accent. He greeted Caleb warmly, then stopped when he saw Katherine. "Boss, you did not tell me you got married," Caleb grinned. "It happened pretty quick. Miguel, this is my wife, Katherine. Katherine, this is Miguel Ramirez. Best hand I ever had." Miguel swept off his hat and bowed slightly. "Mrs. Brennan, it is a pleasure. Caleb is a lucky man." "Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. I am pleased to meet you. Just Miguel, please." He turned back to Caleb. "So this is why you asked me to come today instead of Wednesday. You needed help with the cattle while you were courting. Something like that." Caleb explained briefly about Katherine's arrival and their quick decision to marry, leaving out the details about Walter Perkins and the assault. Miguel nodded thoughtfully. "Your parents would have liked her, boss. She has kind eyes like your mother." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes at the compliment. "Thank you. I wish I could have met them." The three of them worked together that afternoon, moving a small herd to a better pasture. Katherine watched and learned, absorbing everything Caleb and Miguel taught her about handling cattle and reading the land. By the time the sun was setting, she was exhausted but satisfied. She had earned her place here through work, not just marriage. As Miguel rode off toward town, Caleb turned to Katherine. "You did well today, natural horsewoman." "I am sore in places I forgot existed, but I enjoyed it." She paused. "Caleb, when do you think Walter will find out we got married?" "Probably soon. This is a small town and news travels fast." "Are you worried?" "A little. He seemed like the type of man who does not like losing." Caleb's expression hardened. "He did not lose anything because he never had you, but if he gives you trouble, he will answer to me." The confrontation came sooner than expected. 3 days after the wedding, Katherine was working in the garden when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked up to see Walter Perkins driving toward the house, his face red with anger. Caleb came out of the barn at the sound of the wagon, and Katherine saw him assess the situation instantly. He crossed to her side, his hand finding hers. Walter pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down heavily. "So it is true. You married him. You were promised to me, Miss Grace." "It is Mrs. Brennan now," Katherine said quietly. "And I was never truly yours, Mr. Perkins." "You made it clear you were having second thoughts." "Second thoughts are not the same as ending an engagement. You owed me the courtesy of a conversation at least." Walter's eyes were hard as he looked at Caleb. "And you, Brennan. I asked you to meet her at the stage as a favor, not to steal her away." "I did not steal anything," Caleb said, his voice level but firm. "Katherine made her own choice. After you filled her head with romantic notions, no doubt. She was desperate and vulnerable, and you took advantage." Walter stepped closer, aggressive. "I could make trouble for you, Brennan. You are already struggling to keep this place. One word from me to the bank and they could call in your loans early." Katherine felt Caleb tense beside her, but his voice remained steady. "You could try, Walter. But we both know the bank is not going to call in loans that are being paid on time just because you are upset about losing a woman who did not want to marry you. Besides, threatening a man's livelihood over a personal matter is not going to make you look good in town. The town will side with me. I am a respected businessman. You are a struggling rancher who can barely keep his head above water. The town will side with what is right," a new voice said, and Katherine turned to see Mrs. Patterson standing beside the wagon. She must have ridden out with Walter. "And what is right is letting these young people alone to build their life together." Walter looked frustrated. "Margaret, you cannot possibly approve of this hasty marriage." I approve of Caleb Brennan, who is a good man, and I approve of Katherine making her own choices. What I do not approve of is you trying to bully them because your pride is hurt." Mrs. Patterson crossed her arms. "Now, I rode out here with you to make sure there was no trouble, but I can see these young folks have everything well in hand. Why do not you and I head back to town and let them be?" Walter looked between Caleb and Katherine, his expression ugly. "This is not over." "Yes, it is." Caleb's voice was quiet, but it carried an edge of steel. "Katherine is my wife. That is legal and binding and final. If you cannot accept that with grace, then stay away from us. But if you try to make trouble, Walter, you will find I am not as easy to push around as you might think." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Walter turned and climbed back onto his wagon. "You will regret this, Miss Grace. When Brennan loses this ranch and you are living in poverty, you will wish you had chosen differently." "I am Mrs. Brennan," Katherine said firmly, "and I will never regret choosing a good man who treats me with respect over someone who saw me as property." Walter drove off in a cloud of dust, and Mrs. Patterson gave Katherine an approving nod. "Well said, dear. I am sorry he bothered you. I tried to talk him out of coming, but he was determined." "Thank you for looking out for us," Caleb said. After Mrs. Patterson left, Katherine turned to Caleb. "Is what he said true? Could he really cause problems with the bank?" Caleb sighed. "He could try, but I do not think they will listen. I have been making my payments on time, and the ranch is good collateral. But Walter does have some influence in town. He might make things difficult in other ways." "I am sorry I have brought trouble to your door. Hey." Caleb tilted her chin up gently. "You have brought joy to my door. Walter is just a bitter man who does not like losing. We will weather whatever he throws at us." And they did. Over the next few weeks, there were small difficulties. The general store suddenly claimed to be out of certain supplies when Katherine went shopping. Some of the townspeople who had been friendly became cold. But there were also people like Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen and Reverend Matthews who went out of their way to show support. And gradually, as people saw that Caleb and Katherine were genuinely happy together, the tide began to turn. Katherine threw herself into learning everything she could about ranching. She became proficient at riding, could mend fences and tend cattle, and turned the overgrown garden into a productive source of vegetables. In the evenings, she and Caleb would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about their days and their dreams. "I never thought I could be this happy," Katherine confessed one evening about 2 months after their wedding. "When I left Philadelphia, I was running away from everything. I did not dare hope I was running toward something better." Caleb pulled her closer against his side. "I know what you mean. After my parents died, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch because it was what I knew, but not really living. Then you stepped off that stage with your black eye and your brave face, and everything changed. I still cannot believe you proposed to me after one day." "Best decision I ever made." He kissed her temple. "I love you, Katherine Brennan." It was the first time he had said it, and Katherine felt her heart swell. She had been falling in love with him gradually over these weeks, but hearing him say the words made it real. "I love you too, Caleb. More than I ever thought possible." Their life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch work was hard but satisfying, and Katherine found she loved the physical labor and the sense of accomplishment it brought. She became part of the community, making friends with other ranch wives and helping out at church socials. Even Walter Perkins eventually backed off, focusing his energies on courting a widow from Tucson who was more interested in his money than his personality. One morning in late November, Katherine woke feeling queasy. She made it outside just in time to be sick behind the house, and when Caleb found her there, his face went pale with worry. "Are you all right? "Should I fetch the doctor?" Katherine wiped her mouth and started to laugh. "I do not need a doctor, Caleb, or at least not for illness." It took him a moment to understand, and then his eyes went wide. "You are pregnant?" "I think so. I am almost certain." He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around despite her protests that she might be sick again. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "We are going to have a baby. Katherine, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" She knew it was a silly question given his reaction, but she needed to hear it. "Happy, I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He placed a hand gently on her still, flat stomach. "How are you feeling about it?" Katherine thought about it. A few months ago, the thought of having a baby in this rough country with a man she barely knew would have terrified her. But now, with Caleb beside her and a home she had helped build, it felt right. "I am happy too. Nervous, but happy." They told Miguel the next day, and he was so excited he immediately started carving a cradle from a piece of cottonwood he had been saving for something special. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears and started knitting baby clothes. Mrs. Chen insisted Katherine come by the restaurant every week for special teas and soups that would keep her healthy during the pregnancy. The winter passed gently. Caleb insisted Katherine rest more, though she stubbornly continued to help with lighter ranch work. Her belly grew round, and she felt the baby move for the first time in early February, a flutter like butterfly wings that made her cry with wonder. "Does it hurt?" Caleb asked, his hand on her stomach trying to feel the movement. "No, it is just strange, like there is a person inside me, which I suppose there is." She guided his hand to where the baby was kicking. "There, can you feel it?" His face lit up when he felt the tiny movement. "That is our child in there, our son or daughter." "What do you hope for?" Katherine asked. "Healthy. That is all I hope for, a healthy baby and a healthy you." He kissed her gently. "Boy or girl does not matter to me." As spring arrived, Katherine grew larger and more uncomfortable. The baby sat heavy and low, and the doctor said it would come any day. Caleb was beside himself with worry, checking on her constantly and barely willing to leave the house. The labor started on a warm April afternoon in 1883, while Caleb was out checking the fences. Katherine felt the first pain and knew immediately what it meant. She managed to get to the house and sent the ranch hand who had replaced Miguel for the day to fetch Mrs. Patterson and the doctor. By the time Caleb returned, the house was a flurry of activity. Mrs. Patterson had taken over, boiling water and preparing the bedroom, and the doctor was washing his hands at the kitchen pump. Caleb looked terrified. "Katherine, I am fine," she called from the bedroom, though another contraction hit and she could not quite keep the pain from her voice. Caleb tried to come into the bedroom, but Mrs. Patterson shooed him out. "This is no place for men, Caleb Brennan. You go wait outside and let us work." "But she needs me." "She needs the doctor and me right now. You will just be in the way." Katherine heard him pacing outside the bedroom door for the next several hours as the labor progressed. It was harder than she had imagined, the pain intense and relentless. But every time she wanted to give up, she thought about Caleb on the other side of that door and the baby she was bringing into the world. Finally, as the sun was setting, she felt the overwhelming urge to push. Mrs. Patterson coached her through it, and the doctor worked efficiently, and then there was a cry that filled the room with the most beautiful sound Katherine had ever heard. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, holding up a red-faced, squalling infant. "Caleb," Katherine called weakly. "Come meet your son." The door burst open and Caleb rushed in, his face a mixture of joy and relief and wonder. He came to Katherine's side and looked down at the tiny baby the doctor was cleaning and wrapping in blankets. "He is perfect," Caleb whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for this incredible gift." They named him Thomas after Caleb's father, and he was indeed perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy set of lungs, and his father's amber eyes. Caleb was besotted immediately, holding his son with infinite care and watching him sleep for hours. The ranch thrived over the next few years. With Catherine's help and careful management, they paid off the last of the debts and began to expand the herd. They built an addition onto the house, adding a nursery and a larger kitchen. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's auburn hair and his father's serious demeanor, and Catherine found herself pregnant again. Their second child, a daughter they named Alina after Catherine's mother, arrived in the spring of 1885. She was smaller than Thomas had been, but fierce and loud, and she wrapped Caleb around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. 2 children, Caleb marveled one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Thomas play in the yard while Alina slept in Catherine's arms. "Sometimes I still cannot believe how lucky I am." Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder. "You remember the day we met, when I stepped off that stage with a black eye and no idea what I was going to do? I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I had ever seen, and the most beautiful, despite the bruise. You told me that ends today, the violence, the fear, and you were right. That day was the end of my old life and the beginning of everything good." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "You gave me a reason to live again, Catherine. Before you came, I was just existing, working myself into the ground to pay off debts and keep a place I was not even sure I wanted anymore. You reminded me what I was working for: family, love, a future. We have built something good here, haven't we? We have built something wonderful." As the years passed, their family continued to grow. A third child, another boy they named Henry, arrived in 1887, and a final daughter, little Violet, came in 1890 when Catherine was 30 years old. The ranch prospered and became known as one of the best cattle operations in the territory. Caleb hired more hands and built a proper bunkhouse, and Catherine became known for her hospitality and her skill at managing the business side of the ranch. Their children grew up strong and healthy, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with ranch work as soon as they were able. Thomas inherited his father's quiet strength and his love of the land. Alina was bold and fearless, often getting into scrapes that her mother had to rescue her from. Henry was the gentle one, preferring books and the garden to cattle and horses. And Violet, the baby, was the charmer who could sweet-talk anyone into anything. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised Catherine by taking her on a trip to Tucson. They left the children with Mrs. Patterson, who insisted she was delighted to watch them, and spent 3 days in the city like they were young lovers again. "You regret it?" Caleb asked as they sat in a fancy restaurant, a far cry from Mrs. Chen's simple establishment. "Marrying me so quickly, giving up the chance for a different life." Catherine looked at her husband, his face more weathered now, lines around his eyes from squinting at the sun, but still handsome to her. "How could I regret the best decision I ever made? You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You loved me when I did not think anyone could. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Even though we barely knew each other, maybe especially because of that. If we had waited, been cautious, I might have talked myself out of taking the risk. Sometimes the best things in life require a leap of faith." They returned to the ranch refreshed and ready to dive back into the beautiful chaos of family life. Miguel, who had never married himself, was now practically part of the family, teaching the children to rope and telling them stories of the old days. Mrs. Patterson and her husband remained close friends, and Mrs. Chen doted on the children like a grandmother. Even Reverend Matthews remained a presence in their lives, baptizing each child and watching the family grow with satisfaction. "I knew you two were meant for each other," he told them once. "Some things you just know in your bones." Walter Perkins eventually married his widow from Tucson and moved away from Sierra Vista, opening a store in Phoenix. Katherine heard through town gossip that the marriage was loveless and practical, exactly what he had wanted, and she felt a rush of gratitude that she had escaped that fate. In the summer of 1892, when Katherine was 32 and Caleb was 36, they sat on their porch swing watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The children were inside getting ready for bed, their voices and laughter drifting out through the open windows. "Remember when you told me your parents loved each other completely," Katherine said, "that they worked together and supported each other, and that was what marriage should be. I remember. I understand now what you meant. I see it in us. We are partners in every sense of the word." Caleb pulled her closer. "My father used to say that a good marriage requires 3 things: respect, trust, and the willingness to work hard even when it is difficult. We have all 3, you and I. We do, and love. Do not forget love. Never. I loved you from the moment I saw you, Katherine, even though I did not realize it at the time. And I love you more with each passing day." She turned to kiss him, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 10 years of partnership and passion and promise. When they parted, she rested her head on his shoulder and watched the last light fade from the sky. "That ends today," she murmured. "What ends?" "Nothing. I was just remembering what you said that first day. You promised me the fear and violence would end, and it did. You gave me a new beginning, Caleb. You gave me everything." He held her close as the stars began to appear overhead, bright and infinite in the Arizona sky. Inside the house, their children were settling down to sleep, safe and loved. The ranch they had built together stood strong and prosperous. And 2 people who had been strangers 10 years ago sat together in perfect contentment, knowing they had found what so many searched for and never found: true love, built on respect and trust and the courage to take a chance on each other. As the years continued to unfold, the Brennan family became a cornerstone of Sierra Vista. Thomas grew into a fine young man who eventually took over much of the ranch operation, allowing Caleb to slow down a bit, though he never stopped working entirely. Alina married a young lawyer from Tucson who was smart enough to appreciate her spirit. Henry opened a bookstore in town that became a gathering place for anyone interested in literature and learning. And Violet, true to her charming nature, eventually married a banker who adored her completely. Caleb and Katherine watched their children build their own lives with pride and joy, but their favorite times were still the quiet evenings on the porch, just the 2 of them, talking about everything and nothing. The ranch continued to thrive under their care, and they became known throughout the territory as a couple who had built something lasting through hard work and devotion. When they celebrated their 20th anniversary in 1902, the whole town turned out for the party. Mrs. Patterson, now in her 70s and moving slower but still sharp as ever, told the story of their whirlwind courtship to anyone who would listen. Mrs. Chen, whose hair had gone white but whose dumplings were still the best in Arizona, prepared a feast. And Miguel, now an old man himself but still helping out at the ranch when he could, raised a toast to the best boss and friend he had ever known. "To Caleb and Katherine," he said, his voice strong despite his age, "who proved that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them. May you have many more years of happiness together." They did have many more years. They grew old together, their hair graying and their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They became grandparents multiple times over, delighting in each new addition to the growing Brennan family. The ranch eventually passed to Thomas and his wife, But Caleb and Katherine remained in the house they had made into a home, content to watch the next generation carry on what they had started. On a warm spring afternoon in 1920, when Katherine was 60 years old and Caleb was 64, they sat on their porch swing as they had done countless times before. The ranch had changed and grown. The territory had become a state. Automobiles had replaced horses on the streets of Sierra Vista, but some things remained constant. The mountains still rose purple in the distance. The sun still set in a blaze of glory. And Caleb still held Katherine's hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. "I have been thinking about that day we met," Katherine said, her voice still strong despite her age. "You know what I remember most?" "What?" "The way you looked at me. Like I was worth protecting, worth fighting for, even though you did not know me at all. You saw past the bruise and the fear to who I really was." Caleb smiled, the expression crinkling the weathered skin around his eyes. "I saw a woman who was brave enough to cross a continent for a chance at a new life. How could I not fight for that? We have had a good life, haven't we? The best life. Better than I ever imagined possible." Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly against his side as she had for 38 years. "Thank you for keeping your promise, Caleb Brennan. You said that day would end the violence and fear, and it did. You gave me safety and love and a family and a home. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much, Katherine. You gave me a reason to keep going when I thought I had lost everything. You gave me children and grandchildren and a life full of joy. We built this together, every bit of it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and pink and purple. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across Arizona and beyond, living their own lives but always coming home to the ranch for gatherings and celebrations. The land they had worked so hard to keep and improve would continue in the family for generations, and the love they had found in the most unlikely of circumstances had grown and deepened and proved itself over and over again. "No regrets?" Caleb asked softly. Katherine lifted her head to look at him, at this man who had been her husband, her partner, her best friend for more than half her life. His face was lined and weathered, his hair white, his hands gnarled from decades of hard work. But when she looked at him, she still saw the cowboy who had defended her to Walter Perkins, who had proposed marriage after knowing her for one day, who had promised her safety and then spent a lifetime keeping that promise. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "You. Only that I did not meet you sooner." He smiled and kissed her gently. "But I will take 38 years with you over a lifetime with anyone else." As the sun set on another day at the Brennan Ranch, Katherine Grace Brennan reflected on the incredible journey her life had taken. She had stepped off a stagecoach in Sierra Vista with a black eye and a heart full of fear, not knowing what the future would hold. She had been prepared to marry a cold stranger out of desperation. Instead, she had found a good man who saw her worth, who offered her a choice when she had none, and who loved her with a constancy that never wavered. That frightened girl with the bruised eye seemed like someone from another lifetime now. In her place was a woman who had built a life and a legacy, who had raised children and helped run a successful ranch, who had found love and partnership and joy in the harsh, beautiful landscape of Arizona territory. She had been brave enough to take a chance on a stranger, and that leap of faith had given her everything she had ever wanted and more. The mail-order bride who arrived with a black eye had indeed found that it ended that day. The fear, the violence, the uncertainty, all of it had ended when a cowboy looked at her with fierce protectiveness and said those 4 words. In their place had come love and safety and a future brighter than she could have imagined. And as Katherine sat on the porch swing with her husband of 38 years, watching the Arizona sun set over the land they loved, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Sometimes the best decisions in life are the ones made with the heart, not the head. Sometimes a leap of faith lands you exactly where you were meant to be all along. Their story became a legend in Sierra Vista, passed down through generations of Brennans, and told to wide-eyed grandchildren who could not imagine their dignified grandparents as young people taking such a risk. But those who knew Caleb and Katherine best understood that their love was built on more than just a hasty decision. It was built on respect and trust, on shared work and shared dreams, on the daily choice to honor and cherish each other through good times and hard times. As the stars came out overhead and the desert night settled around them, Caleb and Katherine remained on their porch, content in each other's company. They had weathered droughts and financial struggles, celebrated births and mourned deaths, worked themselves to exhaustion and danced at their children's weddings. Through it all, they had remained partners, lovers, friends. The mail-order bride with the black eye and the cowboy who promised to protect her had become something neither had dared dream of. A testament to enduring love, a proof that sometimes taking a chance on the impossible leads to the most beautiful life imaginable. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the thriving ranch that bore the Brennan name, in the story that reminded everyone who heard it that love can be found in the most unexpected places if you are brave enough to reach for it. And so their story ended not with a beginning or a middle but with a continuation, with the knowledge that what they had built together would endure long after they were gone. The bruise had faded within weeks, but the love it led to had lasted a lifetime and would echo through generations to come. That was the true ending, the one that mattered. Not the black eye or the hasty proposal, but the years of devotion that followed, the life they built together, and the legacy of love they left behind.